White Knuckle. It released just about a month ago now, and to say it's a recent obsession of mine is definitely an understatement. I mean, look for yourself. Not bad, right? And just look at the tags. Horror, parkour, roguelike? No wonder why I'm so addicted. Of course, a great game is so much more than the genres it belongs to. A great game is all in the execution, and to that, we have Dark Machine Games to thank. And it makes it all the more impressive that this is actually the first title released by the studio. Released in quotes here though, because the game is only in early access. Even still, the game has an incredible amount of TLC and polish that most AAA games could only dream of. There's so much to say, I'm not even sure where to begin. Oh. Yeah, that makes sense.
Hello, future maintenance worker. Welcome to the Substructure 17 Maintenance Traversal Exam. This exam will test your navigational and problem-solving capabilities to ensure that you are capable of accessing even remote parts of the substructure.
After that cold introduction to what we now know as Substructure 17, the player is faced with a small maintenance traversal course to familiarize themselves with this game's controls. Of course, you have the standard sprinting, jumping, and crouching, but that's par for the course. Things get much more interesting, however, when you're tasked with climbing your first obstacle. Each mouse button controls its respective hand, and from there, you can maneuver anywhere within arm's reach of the ledge. The mechanic seems easy enough to grasp on these smaller walls, but the player is then tasked with maneuvering across a considerably larger gap. This is where you're going to notice the stamina mechanic come into play. The longer a hand grips something, the more tired it becomes. And before you know it, you can see why that would be troublesome for any climber who aspires for great heights. Another interesting thing that you might have already noticed is that the holds, as well as any points of interest, are highlighted in a rusty copper color. This works as an excellent way of guiding the player's eyes through points of interest, as these splashes of color break away from the structure's usual gray and desaturated tones. Not only does this help the player traverse from area to area, it also gives the game an excellent visual identity. Only a hop, skip, and jump away is the player introduced to the first batch of items. That's right, I said first, but we'll get to that other stuff later. Now, to begin with, is the can of food. When your hands get all sore and sleepy, just crack one of these things open and gorge yourself on unlabeled mystery substance. And voila! Good as new. You're ready to keep climbing away. Now, with that binge over with, you turn, and it catches your eye. The closest you'll get to a friend in this entire desolate facility. A hammer. Your hammer. In all of its glory. It's beautiful, isn't it? And, of course, the pittance. Very plentiful, but they need a little bit of manual labor before they can give you anything in return. If not, they'll slip out of the wall without giving the player much of a chance to accomplish anything. Managing these items individually is pretty simple, but when it's all put together, especially on a longer climb, you can really feel how challenging and rewarding it is to master inventory and item management. The last, and my favorite of the bunch, is rebar. You can throw these things into any surface, and as long as the angle isn't too steep, it'll stick and become a climbable object. No hammering required, or thinking for that matter. I mean, why do you think I like them so much? Now, rebar throws do have quite the strong kickback though, which means if you're not on stable ground, throwing one will send you off in the opposite direction. Not very effective for climbing, that is until you start getting pretty creative with it. But I'll come back to that shortly. So I've covered most of the things in this tutorial so far, so I really wanted to take a moment to step back and gush about this game's controls, because I'm not really sure how well it translates through the video itself. But this game feels so good to play. And I've never really felt too passionate about how a game controls because, well, really, there's never really that much to write home about. But the unique climbing mechanics here are executed perfectly. The way the hands instantly grasp from ledge to ledge, the flexibility of movement centered around each hand. There's also a nice weightiness to it that the devs struck such a nice balance with. It is perfectly combined with a surprisingly high skill ceiling that makes it so much more addicting than any game I've played in years. And when all of this is put in the context of a difficult roguelike like this, you just want to keep playing and never put it back down. And really that's all I wanted to say here. Feels amazing. Now that that tangent's over with, you just have one jump left, and... oh, nice.
Thank you, maintenance worker, for completing the Substructure 17 Maintenance Traversal Exam. Congratulations, you are the first worker to complete this course in the last 12,332 days. Celebrate with a glass of wine in your habitation's designated recreational center.
Wait, 12,300 and... That's like January, February, March... 33.78 years? Okay, so it seems like no one's been here in a long time.
Reminder, tomorrow is your first 14-hour shift. Due to low employment, reduced hours are not being approved at this time. Paid time off is not being approved at this time. Sick leave is not being approved at this time. Parental leave is not being approved at this time. Bereavement is not being approved at this time.
Well, at least that's realistic. The darkness fades, and the player is met with a rather ominous command. Escape. And as those words dissipate, you're finally left all on your own. Nothing but the looming ambience to keep you company. Most notable is the rhythmic slam coming from somewhere above. Not a terribly friendly sound. If you take a closer look at anything in your surroundings, you'll also notice that everything ever so slightly shifts in place. So subtle that it might even go unnoticed by some. If you look long enough, it almost becomes hypnotic, as if the wall is breathing. Though it won't be long until you hear the intercom chime, bringing in the substructure's AI announcement system. She has a lot to say about the state of this place, and none of it is good. I think it's reasonable to assume that life in the substructure is pretty bad, though that might have been pretty obvious from the amount of bugs around the facility. The place has a serious infestation problem. And why are some of these bugs golden? Wait, what was that noise? The mass, an ever-looming presence, apathetic as it grows, consuming everything in its path. If you want to get out of this place alive, you'll have to be faster. At every moment, it rises, making every mistake, every slip, every wasted resource devastatingly more painful, because you know it wastes no time in endless expansion. While you might not have much time to spare, if you look closely at the goo, you'll notice some creepy, but extremely interesting revelations. Most prevalent are the arms that reach out from the goo's surface. Are they trying to escape, or pull more things in? Taking an even closer look at the goo, you'll see that its surface is comprised of faces of many suffering people. No doubt those who have succumbed to the mass before you. Creepiest of all is only revealed in extremely close proximity. If you listen closely, you can hear the painful wails of those lost to the mass. The force is clearly something you don't want to fall into. Even still though, it's hard to look away from its harrowing tragedy. The very way that it rolls and folds over itself as it grows continually, it's almost mesmerizing. But you have to keep climbing. Stay focused. There's only one way out, and it's up. 50 meters, 100 meters, 150 meters, 200... Oh, you're dead. I guess it's over? Of course not. You try again. But this time, you understand the facility just a little bit better. Back at the room where it all began. While it might not look very special, I believe it's very well designed, and that's because of how well it accommodates for the player's skill level. You see, the very structure of the room encourages player experimentation by letting them express themselves through their current skills. Your first spawn's gonna look a little something like this. Slow and deliberate. You're getting up no matter how long it takes, but it's not pretty. After a few more attempts, you'll start picking up the speed a little bit as you become more familiar with the extent of your abilities. When you really start to get the game down, your spawns start to look a little something like this. Your third eye opens, and that's when you start to see the game for what it truly is. Everything. A tool to climb. And with every run, you start to see the world a little differently as you develop your skills. The spawn room didn't change, you did. The same sentiment can be found in some of the most common items in the game. The Pitten, for example, is ordinarily an item that is very slow and deliberate. Once you place it on the wall, it needs a few hammer swings before it can be used as a stable hold. Well, where's the fun in that? But if you're quick enough with your hands and you want to look super cool, you can actually use the Pittons without hammering them in a single time. Very useful for ledges that you just barely can't reach without them. Another interesting way you could use this information is by hitting the Pitten in while you're holding on to it. Also very useful when you're short on time. Now, the Pitten isn't the only item to have interesting tricks of its own though. Remember when I mentioned that Rebar had a pretty serious kickback to its throws? As it turns out, you can get pretty creative with this mechanic, which leads to some incredibly high jumps, especially if you dual wield them. Now, instead of playing a section like this, you could play it like this and feel a hell of a lot cooler. Faster too, but who cares about that part? Now with all these new skills, you can climb much faster than you ever have before. Look at you go. I mean, seriously. Oh, maybe there's another way around? So you've lived, learned, climbed, and died, and now you're back to do it all over again. Maybe this time you can actually escape Substructure 17. Maybe. After a few short jumps, you emerge from the spawn room once again. This time though, it's quite apparent that things aren't the same as they were before. While the rooms look familiar, the order and orientation in which they are presented to you is completely different. The same goes for any item or denizen that spawns in these segments. In combination with the Rising Death Goo, the randomization elements do a lot to lay on the pressure for each of your escape attempts. They also help to keep things interesting as you're never quite sure what the game is going to throw at you next. Anyways, after all these runs, you've probably run across these vending machines more than a couple of times now, but what's the currency? There's like a hole with a yellow splatter on top and you just... Oh, it's a bug economy? Okay. Which, I just recently found out, these bugs are used as a currency because the machines turn them into rations. So how about that? Pretty lovely, right? So these vending machines are present occasionally as you climb through each section of the substructure, and always present you with 3 different purchasing options. Interestingly, the bug stash are not lost between runs, which means that you can hoard quite a large collection of bugs to be used in any attempt going forward, with new, stronger items being added to these machines after you found them in the substructure, meaning that you can buy some pretty powerful items as long as you have the bug supply to match. Since we're on the subject, it's probably about time that I detail some of the more interesting items that this game has to offer. These unique finds, while rare, present the player with opportunities through their effects or buffs. Many of the items are hidden away in little nooks and crannies, but you'll more often find them in stashes. You'll know you found one because the stashes are generally accompanied by a music cue. Or maybe revealed by a symbol in white chalk. The most common of these specialty items is the rope rebar, which I think is pretty self-explanatory. Rebar, but with a rope. I'm sure you can see why that's useful. Also scattered across the facility are bricks. These serve as a long-range, high-damage alternative to the hammer. Damaging what, you might ask? Well, I didn't ask you to think for yourself now, did I? Now, of course, it wouldn't be a cruel dystopian future without drug abuse, and this game has plenty of it. Your first option is the painkillers. Take a couple of these and your fatigue will slow to a crawl as you climb from ledge to ledge. Not in the mood to chill? That's fine. Just stick this needle you found on the ground into your arm and feel that roid rage. This stuff lets you fling yourself off holds and jump higher than you usually could with your newly found bulging muscles. Another super strong item is the auto pitten. It's a normal pitten, but you don't need to hammer it into a wall. Rather self-explanatory. These items are a ton of fun to use, especially the drugs. They make everything better. Though that's not a huge surprise. Well, that's about it item-wise. Guess we'll be moving on. Oh wait, there's nothing there. No, stop! Put him down! Okay, so I left one little thing out. I'll tell you about him, just please don't hurt him. Okay, so there are these little creatures, little grubby guys, that can be found sleeping throughout the facility, usually in sewer tunnels or tucked away from plain view, and I mean, look at them. Aren't they just the most innocent thing you'll ever find in this place? Maybe in the whole world. You know, I like to call them little squimblies, and I really like them. Oh, what do they do, you're asking? Well, nothing, of course. Other than being cute, I guess. Okay, fine. You got me. If you decide to use these grubs, you'll squeeze them until they explode, covering you head to toe in their blood and guts. Lucky for you, their insides happen to be incredibly sticky, which means, for a short period, you can climb absolutely anything that has a physical surface. Extremely powerful, extremely cruel. You wouldn't do that though, right? Okay, so I did mention damaging with the bricks and all, so I figure it's probably about time to explore some of the enemies that occupy the lower levels of the substructure, because surprisingly, you are not the only living creature down here. Our first resident is the barnacle. If you played Half-Life, then you might notice that this creature looks and functions very similarly to the barnacle of that series. And no, I'm not nicknaming it barnacle because it's so close to its Half-Life counterpart. It's actually just called the barnacle. These guys stick their tongues out onto the walls, waiting to catch prey and pull them into a rather intimate demise. Vores and all these guys are good for, though. So long as the player only touches the tongue with their hands, they won't be pulled in. This means that the tongues make for improvised swinging bars that the players can use as long as they're careful enough. In normal mode, these guys are easy enough to deal with because they shoot their tongues blindly in random directions, with the chances of hitting a player head-on being pretty low. In hard mode, however, these creatures waste no time in shooting the player head-on if they give them the chance. Unfortunately for me, I have a pretty nasty case of the skill issue that I just can't shake off. On the bright side though, the player's hammer is quite the effective tool for repelling the tongues. Worst comes to worst, you can even battle it out in the middle of being eaten, and if you're fast enough, you could turn them to mush before they do the same to you. Another creature is the, what's that name? Oh, the blood bug. Yeah, so basically, I hate them. Like, I really hate them. These little guys fly around and damage you, but of course, they don't just damage you. No, that would be too easy. You see, these little bastards will slam into you. That means that you have to say bye-bye to whatever ledge you are holding on to, and say hello to the gooey death below. And oh my god, do they have so much health! It takes 3 swings to kill just one, which is maybe fine on its own, but it takes so much knockback from each and every one of your hits. So as long as you're fighting him, you're swinging, waiting for them to come back, and then swinging again. Rinse and repeat. Not very much fun, and sometimes they throw like 3 of these guys at you at once. I understand that they're meant to be very annoying, and I mean the achievement is literally called I hate these guys, but I just don't get anything out of them. The only time I've ever had much fun fighting these guys is when I accidentally learned that you could ride on top of them if you jump onto their heads, but even that's very inconsistent. 0 out of 10. At least the bricks are pretty effective. Now that there are no more bugs in sight, you pull yourself over the ledge once more, but this time you see something a little different. A new title appears above your head, the break room. Finally, a place to relax. These rooms appear around 250 to 300 meters up on your climb, and are filled with lots of little treats for your hard work. Usually a pit in here, a couple of gold roaches there, nothing too interesting. More importantly though, there are always 2 vending machines and an experimental perk computer. That's right, this game has perks. Like with any game that has random perk selection, these add plenty of variety to your sense if you choose to engage with them. Given the experimental nature of these perks, they often come with drawbacks, a sort of give and take, if you will, meaning that sometimes you might be better off not picking a perk at all if you deem the downsides too detrimental. One of my favorites is peripheral binding. This perk reduces your gravity by 50% while severely decreasing your stamina and health. It's quite the massive drawback, but the buff you get is well worth it if you can use it to its full potential, often letting you skip past entire sections of the game at incredible speeds. This, of course, makes it a popular pick within the speedrunning community. The key to success with this perk is to jump off of any holds that you grab the second you've made contact. Any lollygagging and it's off to the mass you go. Another fun perk is Pitten Enthusiast. This one makes it so every pitten you place is automatically secured into the wall. Incredibly useful for sure, and of course, with an ability as powerful as that, it needs to be balanced out. In this case, the perk completely removes your ability to pick up rebar of any kind. Even with these 2 examples, I'm sure you can see just how much these experimental perks change up the run-to-run gameplay. Now that that break is over, you're quickly thrusted into a new environment. Air ventilation. This is where the game sprinkles even more run-to-run variety with different sub-biomes. Sub-biomes? Substructures? I don't know what else to call them, so we're just gonna go with sub-biomes. As of right now, there are 2 different paths that the game can send you down once you leave the break room. The aforementioned air ventilation, and of course, the shattered chambers. Now, as for the former, things are shaken up with the introduction of a new mechanic, air propulsion. This area of the substructure is filled with massive roaring fan blades, spinning so fast that their very draft pushes and pulls you with ease, often being quite advantageous as it allows you to scale large gaps without much of a problem at all. Be careful though, because these fans will turn you into a meat smoothie if you don't pay enough attention, especially if you have the low gravity perk that I talked about earlier. Shatter Chambers, on the other hand, offers much more conventional climbing, but with considerably more challenging level design than Deep Storage. There are also a few more obstacles that you have to worry about in this section, the most directly threatening in this area being the spiky faceplates. In case you were wondering, this is the source of the slamming sounds that we heard earlier at the bottom of Deep Storage. As long as you're not standing in its path when they slam, you should be just fine. Simple, if you ask me. There's also acidic pink sludge in some of the chambers. While it doesn't immediately kill you, it definitely adds quite a bit more attention to the jumps that are being made directly above them. Already, both of these sections are much more difficult than anything that has come before them. If you survive the trek through those areas, you'll be met with even more unfamiliar territory. This time, a massive, cavernous vertical shaft. The words habitation is stenciled across the walls, accompanied by arrows that point upwards. This time though, there are no holds, no ledges, but a completely intact ladder that leads to the darkness above. With the door sealed behind you and the mast trailing not too far behind, you venture forward. Finally, at the top of the silo, you find yourself on the edge of some sort of seal. Were the occupants of Substructure 17 preparing for something like this to happen? Well, whatever the answer may be, it's your best hope of leaving the mast behind for good. After you hit the button, you can see the last glimpses of the goo before the wall seals it off.
Pressure seal engaged. Door latches holding. No leaks detected.
What a relief. Now that the pressure seal is engaged, the gate in the control room opens, beckoning you in. Once you enter, you look to the left and you see another bug-funded machine, this time with the floppy disk icon displayed on the monitor. Interacting with the keypad dispenses a floppy disk and thanks you for your purchase. How kind. Over to the right side is another computer with a suspiciously floppy disk-shaped receptacle. Of course, you put it in and open the monitor. You are presented with two main options, upgrades and biological backups. Clicking the first thing in front of you, you are presented with an array of perks. And might I say, things are looking fantastic. Not a single debuff in sight. The perks from this pool are where you can really start building an OP climber. One of my favorites from the list is Metabolic Stasis. This one makes any temporary buff last significantly longer. I think this one will be especially powerful in the hands of a speedrunner because of how well it pairs with peripheral binding. This is because all the time consumables are exponentially more powerful when paired with the low gravity that the binding grants, some even more than others. The depth of this perk system doesn't end just there. You've probably noticed by now that the rightmost perk has a cost attached to it. That's right, an even higher tier of perk that's backed with a premium cost. These perks are often super strong, often game-changing, like extending your arm's reach or making you secrete cockroach love juice. All really powerful stuff. When you finally decide what perk you want to use... okay. I forgot to tell you. I mean, I didn't say gene modification was gonna be a painless task. Don't worry, it'll only hurt for a moment. Just count to 3 and pull the... See, that wasn't so bad now, was it? And guess what? There's only one more thing you have to do now. You trust me, right? And look, we're gonna use that floppy disk that you spent all your precious bugs on. Just a couple more menus to go and... just skip that. Terms of service jargon. Nothing important. Okay, full disclosure, you might have a sleeper agent. On the bright side though, you also have a save. Unfortunately, it's only usable for a single life though. The checkpoint dispensers only provide a base level floppy disk. There are however level 2 and 3 floppy disks that you might be lucky enough to find, each giving 2 or 3 lives respectively. All fine and good, but this isn't the only thing that these floppy disks are used for. You see, if you insert a floppy disk into the computer, there's a rare chance that the floppy disk already has data loaded onto it. When you open these disks into the computer, you'll be met with a mix of image and text files that clue us in on some of the events that happened here previously. While I haven't been able to find them all, here are a few of the more interesting ones. Nice little secrets, aren't they? Well, this game's secrets don't end just there. All throughout the substructure you can find Doug Ratman-like rooms with paintings and scribbles all over the walls. These murals detail certain figures like the announcer and, most surprisingly, the player character. This means that someone out there knew the player and witnessed them climbing before the game events even took place. Unless they had some sort of clairvoyant superpower and looked into the future or something, but come on. Some of these rooms even have signatures from previous climbers or maintenance workers, maybe? Hidden on top of an empty elevator shaft is my favorite stash. This one has super cool music in it and a ton of good loot. I also really love the messages that are scribbled on the walls. They really do a lot to add to the world building. It's a shame that they're all probably dead, floating in the mass somewhere. Speaking of the mass, the goo happens to be severely allergic to this room for whatever reason, disappearing instantly whenever you reach the door. So, lucky day, I guess. Okay, putting that all aside, you have your perks, you have your saves. Guess it's finally time to see what Habitation Yellow is really like.
Warning. Severe elevator malfunction detected.
The silos are only just the beginning for White Knuckle. Substructure 17 is a massive facility, and there's so much more to be explored. And this isn't even factoring in all the planned updates that are coming to the game later this year. I'd love to talk through it all, but I think there's a lot more magic to discovering this stuff yourself. And this video would be like 4 hours long too, but we're not done just yet though. While I absolutely love this game, there are some things that I'm not a huge fan of. A lot of it just stemming from being an early access title, I'm sure. But I'm gonna be evil today and bring them up anyways. First off, there are some minor collision gripes that I wanted to talk about. Like this one, for example. When a door shuts behind you on a new floor, you have to jump over this outer rim here every time you run over it. Otherwise, the player gets completely stopped in their tracks, which kinda stinks. Aside from that, I also remember ventilation interactions being a little frustrating when I was a new player. Maybe it was just me, but I especially struggled with entering the vents. Like, it was difficult in a way that I don't think it was intended to be. And it's even worse when you come across those vertical L-shaped vent formations, where you have to like pull yourself up and over the corner. It works fine and well most of the time when you get used to it, but the learning process itself was a little bit unintuitive. You can also tell that this game was super inspired by Valve and some of its biggest titles like Half-Life, Portal, and Team Fortress 2. As a big Valve fan myself, well, I was really digging all the inspiration and references. Substructure 17 being a nod to City 17, barnacles, sardonic ambiguous robot announcer ladies. I dig it, I really do. Though, as I kept playing, I kept getting more and more distracted by some of the more heavy-handed Valve references. I mean, the AI announcer makes some pretty direct references to GLaDOS' lines about cakes and birthdays and all.
Warning. You are missing a birthday party just for you in Delta 45's research chamber in Sector 13.
Part of the facility is also literally called Lambda Labs. None of this is really a big deal or anything. It's just that the more I interact with the references, the more it starts taking me out of this incredibly well-crafted world. The Striders and Barnacles don't even have like name changes or anything. Once again, it's not a big deal. I just hope that as it gets more updates, the game will do more to distance itself from some of its inspirations, because I really like the universe that they have set up so far. And with that, I think I've said just about everything I've wanted to say. This game, even in its early access state, is simply phenomenal. And like God, the controls. I don't think I've ever played a game that feels this good to play. Never before have I become so hooked, so fast on a game. This is all to say, go check the game out. Support it in any way you can because it absolutely deserves it. And if you guys want to see more stuff from me, feel free to subscribe down below and maybe go follow my blue sky. Okay, that's everything, like, for real this time. Thanks for watching.